Alyn Smith, Scottish National Party. Sheep tagging is something you've been worried about for some years now. What are the problems, just to recap?
Well, the problems remain with the practicality of the legislation itself, that we have an extensive flock management system in Scotland. A number of our sheep, they don't see humans for the best part of 3 months on end. So having a tag which is electronic within the animal's ear is just impractical because they get lost, the sheep get lost themselves, they may get sadly die on the hills. So to say that we're going to have 100% traceability just isn't reasonable, just isn't practicable and just isn't achievable. So what we had today was a very helpful meeting with the European Commissioner, making the point, and there was 14 MEPs from umpteen different countries making the point that, look Chief, this isn't working, we're still paying attention to this and you need to make sure that this is front of mind to actually have a review of the process.
I mean, these were concerns you had before this even came into force. Now it's in force. How is it going down in Scotland? Are you seeing Scottish farmers facing those penalties you feared they might?
Well, it was one of the points I made in the meeting that literally 5 years ago, in literally the same room, we had a meeting with the Commissioner's predecessor where we raised precisely the problems that are now coming to pass. Now, we're not seeing the proportionate penalties coming through as yet, but that's in the pipeline, and we need to make sure that the penalties, when they do come through, are reasonable and are proportionate to the sin of actually missing the legislation that has actually been occasioned by the problems with the technology, the fact that the legislation doesn't fit the way we manage our flock in Scotland, and other countries too. We've got a broad consensus on this across the Parliament that this needs to be changed, and I think we're pushing at an open door with the Commissioner.
Pushing at an open door. What did he have to say, really? How receptive was he to the problems you say you have in Scotland and other countries as well?
Well, it's the first rule of politics, is the first rule of the playground. It's shy kids get no sweeties. If we don't go to the Commission and complain, the Commission's not going to be aware that the legislation isn't working, which it assuredly is not. Now we're trying our best to make it work. The Scottish Government's done a great deal of work with funding a database that will actually tie all the information together, and done right it could help us manage our flock better. But we're going to need a transition period, and we're going to need a reassurance that Scotland's farmers are not going to be unfairly penalised because of badly drafted legislation.
So I understand that the Commissioner says that the legislation will at some point be reviewed. What does that mean in practice?
I think we actually will be able to harvest the benefits is on the proportionality of the penalties as they come through, that if we are genuinely trying and if we are genuinely doing our best to implement the legislation in the best way, but it's just not practicable, then the Commission will take a reasonable approach on that. And I think that's in the pipeline too. I think the Commission is sensitised to the fact that this isn't working, and that's because of pressure from MEPs in the European Parliament.
Is that a more longer-term solution to get a review that sees, say, penalties become more proportionate? Is the work that you as an MEP are going to have to do in the shorter term to protect, as you see it, Scottish farmers from some of these penalties?
Well, I promised the sheep farmers of Scotland and the rural communities of Scotland that I wasn't going to let this rest, and I've been working with colleagues from Wales, from Northern Ireland, from Ireland, even Germany and the Netherlands today, that we are going to keep this to the top of the European Parliament's agenda, because if we're passing bad legislation that doesn't work on the ground, then that's a bit daft, and we need to come back to that, change the legislation and make sure that it fits the way we do things.